What is the creepiest episode of a TV show you've ever seen? Story 1 Squidward's ending is told from the point of view of an animation intern for Nickelodeon. It's been a while since I've read it, so I can't remember many of the details. But basically, they stumble upon a tape of a SpongeBob episode that had weird animations. I think Squidward was at a clarinet recital. As usual, he sucked. The audience laughed at him, and he went home all sad and crying. It shows a still poor Squiddy standing in his room, eyes red from tears. There were supposed to be sound distortions and pauses in the tape to make it a little more creepy. His eyes start bleeding. Sorry, trying my best on minimal creepy. And he starts sobbing pretty loudly. The pauses in the tape flicker split-second images of dead babies and other stuff. His crying just gets louder and more creepy. Then a voice says to do it, and he does it. Story 2. Some Adventure Time episodes can be pretty creepy. Sure, it's a kid's show, but if you really think about some scenes, they're really messed up. The episode Dad's Dungeon, for example, is supposedly about how Finn and Jake's dad left a dungeon with monsters to test Finn to see if he was a real man. Near the end, the boys watch a recording of their dad talking about how the last monster was the scariest, and then a huge hand grabs him and pulls him into the darkness. The boys continue on as if nothing happened. So basically their dad died while making a test for them that they would have to pass through after he died. Does anyone see how messed up that is? The Clown episode 2. F that. I think the fact that the characters are always happy just makes it scarier. The Ice King, for example, is tragically insane. In one of the latest episodes, he was talking to Finn about the ghosts he sees all the time, and then the camera zooms into his face, and he's smiling at the camera with placid eyes and says, "I hate them," softly. Creepy as hell. Story 3. In England, there used to be a TV show called Jigsaw, which ran from about 1979 to 1984, way before my time, but I've seen it nonetheless. It was a kids' TV show that was generally fine, except for one segment done by a character called Nosy Bunk. He was basically a guy in a dinner suit wearing a white mask with huge eyes and a massive nose. Every time I mention him to somebody who would have been a kid watching this show, they shudder a little. Every time. Story 4. There was a children's show in the 70s in the UK called Children of the Stones, where the main character was a kid who moved to Avebury, a village in England with a stone circle like Stonehenge, with his dad, and things started getting weird, such as the whole village being part of a creepy cult. I can't watch it alone. It's one of the most terrifying things I've ever watched. Story 5. The Powerpuff Girls episodes involving the character him, he, voiced by Tom Kane, is a mysterious, supernatural, red-skinned, effeminate, immortal, devilish entity. His physical appearance is an amalgamation of sorts with crab-like claws, red skin, pointed ears, a hooked nose, yellow-green eyes, and a long curled beard, wearing makeup, a woman's red jacket and skirt with pink tulle at the collar and hemline, and black, thigh-high, spike-heeled hooker boots. His voice ranges from a high-pitched falsetto to a deep, booming basso profondo. Story 6. Are You Afraid of the Dark? There was an episode where a young man in his 20s inherits a large mansion from his deceased grandfather. What he didn't know was that this mansion had an anomaly, some sort of dark sentient matter that ate things up to the bone once any living thing came into contact with it. There is a scene where the grandson sees the dark matter chew up a rat, and as a kid, I was pretty frightened. During the last scene, the grandson sets up a trap, tarps over every window, a dark tube leading up to the attic with birds at the corners for warning, and a giant light pointing at the tube. You see and hear the dark matter quickly eat the birds climbing to the top of the house. The light gets disconnected, malfunctions, and by the time the man plugs it back in, the matter is on his face. He is then forced to shine the light on him, killing the matter but blinding him in the process. The very last scene has him sitting in the same chair as his late grandfather saying, "Are all the lights on?" Story 7. In that episode of Pingu where he dresses up like a ghost to scare his sister, Then later on, stuck in his room as a punishment, he sees someone walk by the door. I've no idea why this freaked me out so much. I'm not even sure I've got the episode right, but he was definitely in bed, and someone walked in front of the door. And the other episode, where the eggs start running away, I was a little afraid of eggs after that, and when I refused to get some eggs for my mum, and she asked me why, I explained, and she laughed, then explained that eggs don't do that in real life, but even today, I'm still watchful of eggs, even mini eggs and creme eggs and stuff, and a lot of Goosebumps when I was a kid. All of them freaked me out. Story 8. There's a little talk about an episode of the Twilight Zone called "And When the Sky Was Opened" that just destroyed me when I saw it. The basic premise is that when 3 pilots return from an experimental spacecraft, one by one they start being blinked out of existence. That's it. There's no twist, no resolution, just the sheer terror in each man as they disappear from reality. That's what made it so damn scary to me. It was never explained why it was happening, and because of that, there was no way to stop it. The sheer terror in that just kills me. Also, although it is technically a short film, the episode Occurrence on Owl Creek Bridge was pretty terrifying from beginning to end. In particular, the final 30 seconds or so are some of the most jarring moments in TV history in my opinion. Just unnerving. Story 9. My creepiest episode of television would be one from Doctor Who, part of the Revival series. More specifically, the episode Midnight, when David Tennant was still the Doctor. I'll try not to spoil anything for those of you who haven't and still plan on seeing it, but it's creepy as hell. Maybe I'm the only one that thinks so. I don't know. Everyone always knee-jerks toward any Weeping Angel episode as their creepiest Doctor Who episode, but I say differently. Just watch it, and you'll know why. Maybe. Story 10. I doubt anyone will know what show this was, but I remember back sometime in the early 80s, there was some TV show we watched in school, probably first or second grade for me, that had a young kid getting on a subway car full of frozen people. I don't think they were dead, but she was walking around looking at all of these people who were completely still and quiet and frozen. For some reason, it creeped me the hell out. I'm sure there was much more to it than that, but that image of a kid walking through all these frozen people is the only thing that has stuck with me all these years, and I still find it creepy. I wish I could remember what show it was. We watched a lot of Reading Rainbow and other similar shows. It very well could have been something on that show. I remember one show with a magic ring, an exercise bike or something, but again, not the name. Story 11 Tugs. Ghost Part 1 Tugs. Ghost Part 2. For those of you who don't know what Tugs is, it's a children's TV show that was around in 1988-89. It's a sort of puppet show featuring boats that talk, and it goes on their journeys, trying to solve puzzles. This ghost episode, though, was so scary and creepy. I still get the chills just watching it now. They're multiplying. Apologies for the pun. Had to write it. D. The episode is about some eerie things that happen to various and everything being seen. Then at around 2:15 in part 2, some creepy thing happens. Lightning storms, ghost boats, and some faces appear in the clouds. The 2 boats that are there are terrified. I was too. This is a damn children's show. The other episodes aren't exactly child-friendly, I would say. Story 12. I think it was an episode of the show Goosebumps. Correct me if I'm wrong. A girl was looking for a Halloween mask for a party or something and found one at this shop in the back room. But if you put the mask on 3 times, it would never come off again, or something like that. I was little, like 7 or 8, when it was on, and it just freaked me out. I think I turned the episode off before it got over. Another one I didn't like as a kid was an episode of The Simpsons, where Homer sees an alien in the woods on his way home from the bar. It was glowing green and walked softly through the woods. Mulder and Scully were there. It ended up just being Mr. Burns glowing from radiation from the power plant. Again, I was probably 8 years old. Had nightmares about that dang alien walking through my house. Story 13. An episode of House. Season 7, Episode 17. Fall from Grace. A homeless man who hides his real name and other information comes in after being burned by a rocket thrown by kids in a park. He gains the master's trust by revealing false information that makes her believe she has gained his trust, and he wants to repent for his past wrongdoings. They find bones in his stomach that he couldn't digest and had been causing all his problems. They remove them, and he is recovering. All seems well. Anyway, the final scene. Masters and Danny, sick guy, have a really close moment with Masters saying she would like to help assist Danny get back on his feet and in touch with his father and will do anything. Danny agrees and says he'd like that. The next day, Masters comes into the hospital and she sees police and FBI searching his room. Masters asks what's going on, and it turns out he's a serial killer cannibal who has eaten 13 women, and the final shot is of Masters' face with tears in her eyes. Scary crap. Story 14. The one I remember the most is from an ABC TV sitcom during the mid to late 90s. I believe it was an episode of Dharma and Greg, episode 6 of season 2, A Closet Full of Hell. I'm pretty sure this was one of their Halloween episodes, and I remember it being a very creepy episode for a sitcom. In the show, one of the main characters finds a set of stairs behind a false wall in their closet leading to an attic above their apartment. In the attic, they find a doll hung up by a noose. The character returns with his friends only to find more dolls now hanging by a noose. I believe they are then startled by an old lady. She introduces herself as living in a neighboring apartment with a shared attic space that she uses to let the paint dry on the dolls she hand makes. Later on, they go over to the old lady's apartment to talk with her, only to have a younger man open the door. When they ask for the old lady, he informs them that she is his mother, and she has been dead for several years now. I know I saw this when it aired, but I've never seen it since then. I remember because it was pretty creepy for an ABC sitcom. Story 15. It might have been an Amazing Stories episode, I can't remember, but in it, there's a guy who just acts like a complete and utter jerk. If I recall, he's somewhere in South America. Anyway, he gets into a car accident and becomes paralyzed. The rising and growing panic in the voiceover as they carry him around is terrible. At one point he starts to move his finger, and so he starts twitching his finger, hoping that one of the people preparing him now for autopsy burial, until one of them, absent-mindedly, grabs his hand and straps it down or something. The voiceover, pleading, screaming, "I'm alive," is a distilled nightmare. Story 16. There's an old episode of Alfred Hitchcock Presents called Bang. Your Dead is centered around a little boy who found a loaded gun in his uncle's suitcase and started walking around town with it. There wasn't a ton of dialogue or story. The little boy just goes around town, dressed like a cowboy, doing what little boys do, thinking that this revolver he has is a toy. You spend the whole episode terrified that this kid is going to shoot someone for not sharing or playing Injun. It's one of the most unsettling things I've ever watched, and to this day, I'm not a fan of handguns. Story 17. There was an episode of Rugrats where Chucky is experiencing a sequence of nightmares as a kid, and the end of the episode is him finally getting to sleep, and his dad walks into the kitchen, and his neighbor is over for some reason, with his back turned, and he says, "Oh, Stu, I didn't know you were coming over." And he turns around, and to see Stu has giant blue eyes and sausage-like nose and his tongue hanging out the side of his mouth, and yells in a clown voice, "I'm not Stu, moi ha ha." To this day, it freaks me out a little. Story 18. I'm sure this will get buried, but anyway. Somehow, Satan got behind me. An episode of Millennium from the early 2000s. 4 vile demons, servants of evil who pose as elderly men, gather for their nightly meeting in a downtown donut shop and discuss over coffee and crullers their own personal methods of leading humanity down the path to hell. During the discussion, they come to the realization that they've all encountered a gifted man who may have seen them for the demons they truly are. Frank Black. Story 19. There was this one episode of Torchwood where people in the North were disappearing. Turns out a family was hijacking and eating them. Kind of a left turn from the usual aliens and crap. Spoiler. But that's not the creepy part. The thing that really gets me is at the end, when the team rounds up the family, the dad asks if they want to know why they do what they do, why they have been doing it for as long as he can remember, because it makes me happy, in a soft, almost sad voice. Story 20. If someone remembers this episode of Looney Tunes, then please let me know. It seems like most forgot about it. It used to scare the crap out of me. Bugs Bunny doing his natural antics and trolling Elmer, Sam, and Daffy, but he keeps running into these strange alien carrots. They end up taking over Elmer, Sam, and Daffy and replace them with creepy robots. The robots keep pestering Bugs to take one of the alien carrots with him. He finally decides to take one home, and then, as he sleeps, it oozes open, and an evil Bugs clone with an axe tries to kill the real Bugs. At the end of the episode, everything is okay, but still that episode always stuck to me. In fact, they just showed it today after years of not seeing it. So does anyone remember this episode? Story 21. There's an episode of Are You Afraid of the Dark, where this teenage girl meets an elderly woman who lives alone. The woman asks the girl for tea or something on a particular date, and the girl ends up breaking her promise. When she goes back to the old woman, she demands to know why the promise was broken and goes berserk. What got under my skin was when the old woman said, "I wanted you to come over that day because that was the day I died." Holy crap. That was a lot for 8-year-old me to handle. Story 22. I remember once my mom was watching Oprah and I was within hearing distance. It was an episode about kids who were basically tortured by their parents, kept in cages and closets for years and the like. I was like 8, and just the thought that this happened really messed with my head. I'm sure had my mom realized I was watching, or had noticed, at least the look on my face, she would change the channel. One line that always, for whatever reason, got to me was this kid whose parents only ever fed him moldy white bread covered in a burning sauce. Story 23. There was this show where a ship, Space, ended up somewhere where things would attach to people's faces, Half-Life style, and give them hallucinations as it killed them. Only 2 people made it out alive and went through some crazy stuff to make it. The end of the show reveals the main character lying there where he was at the very beginning of the show with one of those things on his face. I came in about a minute into the show and did not see what it was. This was probably sometime in the mid-1990s. I didn't pay attention to what it was or what channel it was on because it went from just pretty good to awesome in the last few minutes. If someone remembers that show, it would be pretty cool to finally know what show it was. It came across like a sci-fi version of Tales from the Dark Side or something similar. Story 24. Laughing in the dark. Are you afraid of the dark clowns? Nuff said. Dreammaker, Land of the Lost, 1991. I was pretty young when I saw this, and I don't remember a lot of details, but the family thinks they have made it home and find this desolate copy of their suburban neighborhood, and their unseen mother's voice echoes out in this supremely creepy, droning way that stuck with me ever since. Smoldering Children, American Horror Story. The scene where Tate shows Violet her body in the basement is just so messed up. Days Gone By, The Walking Dead. Pick this just because I think the first moments of any good zombie survival horror are key, and The Walking Dead made it very creepy. Rick making his way out of the hospital and through the streets was intense. Hush and the Body, Buffy the Vampire Slayer. Hush showed you what it might be like if you couldn't make a sound as your organs were slowly pulled out of you. The Body was horrifying on a much more personal, psychological level. Buffy dealing with Joyce's natural, unpreventable death. Story 25. Black Mirror. Each episode destroys you in a different way. I feel like the trailer that's on YouTube gives some of it away. I think it's even more creepy if you just watch them without knowing anything specific about the show. All you need to know is the following. Black Mirror is a 3-part television drama series created by Charlie Brooker. Regarding the program's content and structure, Brooker noted, each episode has a different cast, a different setting, even a different reality, but they're all about the way we live now, and the way we might be living in 10 minutes' time if we're clumsy. Story 26, Ghost Whisperer. I watched it frequently when I was about 7-9. I didn't often get too scared, but there was one episode that really stuck with me. It was the one where this young boy, maybe aged 11 or 12, had been tormenting his mother and baby sister, I believe. He was pretty disfigured too, really pale skin and hollow eyes. I'm a bit fuzzy on the details, but I think his mother was a bit of a workaholic, and she kept making promises that she had to cancel. He died because she had promised to take him out to a baseball game, and when she eventually couldn't deliver, he got pissed and stole the car and crashed into a tree or something. I think his name was Daniel. Anyway, just really creeped me out for some reason. Sorry for the bad formatting or whatever. Story 27, Grave Danger. It was an episode of CSI written by Quentin Tarantino. The premise involves a killer burying one of the agents alive in a plexiglass coffin rigged with pressure-sensitive explosives, a light inside so they can see all the dirt piled on every side of them, a small air supply, and a webcam with a link so that other agents get to watch him die. Plus, there's a thing about how anyone who clicks watch on the feed temporarily cuts off the air supply, so they're monitoring him to solve it also helps him die. Then, after a while, something triggers, and the coffin begins to fill with fire ants. So many bad vibes there. Story 28. A few people have said Hush from Buffy, and as creepy as that one is, it's nowhere near the creepiest one for me. The one with the Queller demon, where Buffy's mom is a bit insane from the brain tumor she has, is seriously disturbing to me. It's like the boogeyman is real, and no one will believe her. When it's above her in bed staring back down at her, it gives me the willies. Story 29. So, one of my favorite anime is a show called Higurashi no Nakukoro ni. The main plot of the show involves trying to find the culprit of a string of horrible annual murders. The show is also in a time loop so that the most recent murders keep getting replayed over and over in different and terrifying ways. The show has a lot of is what I'm watching magic or science, so they have a season that just shows all of the answers. During this season, there are 2 or 3 episodes that are absolutely horrifying. In them, the cute teen girl character gets her nails pulled out, one by one, as punishment for loving a guy from a rival family. This guy eventually vanishes mysteriously. In turn, she goes on a rampage. She does things such as crucifying, locking up her own twin sister in her basement dungeon, etc., all in the name of trying to get vengeance for this boy that she has known for all of 2 weeks. Story 30, Dinosaurs, the series finale. The series ends because Earl accidentally brings on the Ice Age, dooming everyone. The ending scene with Earl and the baby was memorable. Baby, are we gonna move? Earl, well no, there's no place to move to. This is the only world we've got. Baby, what's going to happen to us? Earl, well, I don't exactly know. Zoom out through the window of their rapidly freezing house. Everyone is going to die. The end.